So welcome to the afternoon of our second day of Tech Summit Chicago. My name is Chris McNulty. I'm a senior product manager for SharePoint and OneDrive out in Redmond. It is fantastic to be back here in Chicago. I was here for the SharePoint Fest event last month, which was actually much colder. And when we were looking at, when I was realizing what I had actually signed up for and realized I'd signed up to come to Chicago in mid-January, which I have done intentionally before as well, being a Bostonian, originally, adapting to the super mild winters we get in the Northwest, I was really looking forward to, what we hardy folks of the North are used to, 2 feet, 3 feet of snow and ice and 0-degree weather, with whether it's, 30-mile-an-hour winds off the lake or 30-mile-an-hour winds off the ocean. It's what we're used to. So it's a very pleasant surprise to be here, high 40s and foggy. So really appreciate everyone coming out to our, I almost said Cloud Roadshow, but Tech Summits, which is an opportunity for us to take the material that we develop and share at events like Ignite and WPC and be able to break this out for audiences free of charge around the world. This is a much easier trip for me. My next Tech Summit I'm speaking at is in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is about a 25-hour flight for me. So wonderful to be back here. Wonderful. Always a great city. Always happy to be back. When we think about SharePoint and OneDrive as kind of the core containers for enterprise-based collaboration, and we kind of look at what's been going on across the industry, we're very proud of the levels of growth and what our commitment has been to security. We fundamentally believe that the safest place for your enterprise content anywhere in the world is going to be inside SharePoint Online and OneDrive. And that's really been borne out as we look to the enterprises and organizations that have been moving to Office 365, dozens and hundreds of thousands of users. We have over 200,000 organizations already using SharePoint and OneDrive. More than 80% of the Fortune 500. 190 million seats. And by the way, these are the official numbers that we published last year. The actual numbers are obviously higher, and we'll have new numbers later this year. And the explosive growth that we're seeing for numbers of users, the amount of content online, as well as we're still seeing, it's probably worth reflecting, we are still seeing steady growth in the numbers of users on premises, which is interesting to us as well. It's not explosive. It's not 200%, 300%, 500% growth because that's a more mature market. But we understand that people are finally moving and embracing the cloud. My colleague Dan Holm yesterday in his session on the mobile and intelligent intranet talked through one of our recent case studies, Delta Airlines, which in one day last May moved nearly 400,000 users en masse to Office 365. Now, they had been working on it for a couple of weeks, or a couple of months more accurately, so it wasn't a one day they woke up in the morning and decided to start using it. But highly performing, highly scaled, really appropriate for hundreds of thousands of users using the shared services of Office 365. So there are some debates kind of across security and compliance at Office 365 about our best ways of speaking about it. People talk about, one of our core values is trust. And one thing I like to say when we're talking about security, privacy, and compliance is trust is not a product. Trust is something that we have to earn with our partnership with each of you every day, every week, every month, every year. There are other parts of SharePoint that we talk about and we look to optimize for ease of use and for adoption and usage and accelerated collaboration. I think it's important for us to focus on the things that inform our product and functional decisions as we continue to roll out innovation for OneDrive and SharePoint. First and foremost, we think actually, although security is powerful and there's a lot of complexity under the hood, we may not have been doing the best job telling the story historically. We provide a broad set of tools and capabilities. There are the things that we do and the tools that we give you to help you manage your own security. Your data is yours. We are just the caretakers of your information that you give to us. We have no standing access to your data. We have a feature called Lockbox we'll talk about in a few minutes. If you ever want someone at Microsoft to look at your data to help you troubleshoot a problem, we're happy to do it. We have all sorts of extra protocols that have to kick in. You need to request it. It needs to be multiply approved internally by our management with even extra levels of auditing. But we do not have standing access to your data. It is your data. We are just caretakers. We feel strongly that our cloud platform is the most secure and the most broadly distributed around the world. We operate in more data regions than our closest two competitors combined. Our newest data center will be opening next month in France, having most recently opened up data centers focused on the needs of Germany in our Black Forest data center, as well as ITAR for organizations that need to work with export-restricted information. We have a new data center offering dedicated just to that, alongside the dozens of regions we operate in here in the US, in Europe, in Asia, all around the world. We also believe that security without usability is no security at all. My background, I joined Microsoft a year and a half ago. I spent 10 years running a consultancy in the Northeast, focused on medium to large enterprises, and then 5 years as CTO of an ISV, managing the way that we went out into the ecosystem in the SharePoint space. So I've looked at this from lots of perspectives before. And I've spoken about governance, and governance is kind of a core element to security, privacy, and compliance. And I've described governance as the balance between runaway usage and users running away. If we index too hard towards security and lots of stringent controls, and you've got to rub your belly and pat your stomach just to make a change to a file, and it takes 15 minutes to do anything anywhere because everything has to be super encrypted, people can't share anything, people can't move anything, you don't have a secure platform. What you've done is you've driven people to other things because we've made it too hard for people to get their jobs done. Security needs to be, in my estimation, needs to be present. For confidence in users, they need to know that what they're doing is safe, but it needs to be as unobtrusive as possible. So we need to balance the needs of information workers to go in and get their jobs done with the IT and compliance needs of making sure that jobs are being done properly and being done safely. And finally, security needs to be customizable. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all. What is appropriate for a small accounting office in the Midwest is completely inappropriate for a large multinational financial services organization or a sub-Saharan African refugee organization. All sorts of different needs and compliance. What's important to us is that we provide a broad range of tools that we can jointly work with you, combining them in the appropriate way to make sure that you have the safest possible environment for your information and for your users. And it's this. Okay, let's see. So as we think about all of the tools and capabilities, we really organize them into these 5 core pillars of security, privacy, and compliance. And we're going to walk through each of them in more detail. First and foremost, platform security. What we're doing, whether it is the bricks and mortar security we have in our data center, as well as the back-end levels of encryption that we have to make sure that the fundamentals, the foundational elements of Office 365 are always safe. Second, secure access and sharing. How do we allow you to maintain controls of who is and who isn't allowed to get access to content? And we recognize that that access, that controlling who's able to get in is no longer as simple as setting up a permissions list. Permissions lists are important. Absolutely, being able to put people into an ACL is fundamental to how security starts. But we recognize that it's in a diverse and burgeoning world of different ways that work gets done, that we need to be able to balance the mix of where someone is physically in the world, what network they're on, what region, what device they're on, what their role is, and what the content is. All of which also needs to be composited with the ways that I can share information with known users that I've defined, with known external users, or even anonymous users. And all of those tools and capabilities need to be flexible to allow certain classes of content to be worked with and other classes of content to be tightly controlled or regulated. Third, we'll talk about awareness and insights, because to be able to understand the patterns of behavior that users have, we need to be able to define a policy, we need to be able to see what users are doing in the first place, as well as if we think that someone's running right up against the limits of our policy, we need to be able to step in and see how many people have been deleting files, who, what, when, where, why, so then we may be able to go in and step action. In order to be able, I've spoken about this topic before. There's, 3 levels that we ascend to. First is awareness, that we have something that is right or wrong and how we want to govern usage and information. Second is action, to step in, define some sort of behavior that I want to stop or empower. And then finally, policy, being able to put hard rules in place to help shape where that user behavior goes first and foremost. It's also important with awareness and insights to deal with the very important human characteristic about doing what I like to talk about as people-centric security. I've had some philosophical debates with friends and colleagues before about what is the role of system controls. And some people are very much on the side of there should be absolutely no action that any user can ever take that isn't governed and controlled or preventable by the system. And I happen to believe that human beings are mostly well-intentioned, mostly eager to do the right thing if it's explained to them what the right thing is, and also really kind of tired and not willing to go too far out of their way to get their job done. So it's very important, you'll see as we go through some of the demos, being able to help coach users about what the right behavior is. Most users really don't want to share a file full of social security numbers anonymously across the internet. And it's one thing to have a policy to prevent it. It also is helpful to show the user, hey, it looks like you're trying to do this. We don't think you really mean to do this. And based on your information governance, then being able to go in and structure that. Turning to the fourth pillar, information governance. Whereas some of the other things are talking about who the user is, who the device, what's happening at the endpoint, information governance is about the content itself, controlling where it goes in my information architecture, as well as controlling where it goes outside my information architecture. So certain highly secret or privileged bits of information we may want to control with tools like encryption, so that even if they're copied somewhere else, we can control how they're used and revoke access to those files wherever they happen to be copied in the world. Also, there may be some sections of my intranet or some sections of my extranet where I want to have wide open, be able to share information with a broad range of people to do things like ideation and idea generation and rapid collaboration, and other places where I want to take advantage of all of the security and safety of Office 365, but work with highly privileged information like financial or health records. And those are kinds of things we may want to have very close controls over where those things go in the information architecture, synchronized to mobile devices or not. And finally, compliance and trust. We have a broad range of certifications, and along with visibility for everything that we're doing in our operations, the kinds of agreements we're willing to sign with you. Compliance and trust for us is about making sure that we are at the forefront of what we're able to do with the certifications we have for information, as well as helping you have control of things like encryption, when you want to specify and control your own encryption keys. So broad range of capabilities there. So let's begin by talking about what we do for platform security. And for us, it begins, as I mentioned, with physical on-premises security, what we're able to do to make sure encryption is being enforced, our rules of operation for how the data center works, and finally, how you can participate in that by adding your own key and controlling it in our environments. So it's worth noting that our data centers around the world are highly automated. It's also probably worth noting, when we say data center, we frequently use the word data region. There was a video that they produced internally last summer showing the opening of West 2, which is an area down in Southern California. The West 2 data region, and they go through one of those typical high-speed videos. You watch the whole thing rise, and the cranes come in, and the cranes go out, and the sun goes overhead like 43 times in 10 seconds. And you see all the server racks come in, and they tell you there's enough wire in this to go around the world 10 times, yada, yada, yada. The detail I thought was most fascinating is that we're opening another one of those buildings once a week. So that's the kind of growth and the kind of investment that we're making in the cloud. We make sure that they are highly automated. The moment we see a server that needs physical attention, we don't necessarily rush someone in. We wait until it's efficient for someone to go in there. Almost all activities across our data centers are highly automated so that they do not require direct human interaction in most cases. Along with what you would expect, biometrics for who can get in, 24/7 security. The physical security of what's going on in those data centers is considerable. We make sure across any single data region, at any point in time, your information is always stored in at least 2 places. That way, we can keep your data within the same region. If you're expecting for issues of latency or data sovereignty that your information is always staying in the UK, for example, it always is staying in the UK. And you have that visibility into where that data goes at all points in time. We also make sure that we're doing the things you would expect, making sure we're looking for malware, we're doing real-time scanning for antivirus. You can also bring in advanced threat protection to be able to look for things as they're coming up. I still run into a couple of folks who passionately believe that information is safer on premises and in the cloud. And I really want to help dispel that notion here today. And that is not something that's unique to Microsoft. If you're talking about a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon or a Salesforce, etc., all of us have thousands of people working on security, looking at trends in the industry, at what we're getting from our telemetry, being able to predict and update in advance of zero-day attacks. Those kinds of capabilities, both with the staffing as well as the on-premises security, are really hard to duplicate inside of any on-premises data environment. When we look at most of the major data breaches over the last 2 or 3 years, well over 85% of them are on-premises data breaches. Someone who plugged into a network was able to come into a localized Wi-Fi. The patterns there, the vast majority of those data breaches are on-premises breaches. And so by being able to minimize the footprint, minimize the attack surface, by pulling everything back to secure cloud data centers, we're able to assure much greater security. We also, one of the things that I think really distinguishes Microsoft is our cybercrime prevention unit. And by the way, when we were preparing these slides, one of the points I wanted to make crystal clear, this is originally being described as our cybercrime unit. We do not actually have a cybercrime unit. It's a prevention unit. But it is a dedicated building on the Microsoft campus where we're doing research to help look for things. We also have separate, isolated, secure facilities and networks to work with law enforcement so they can come in, take a look at forensics from agencies around the world to ask our guidance at helping prevent further cyber crimes, as well as our providing information to them on patterns of behavior when it's appropriate. We also do an awful lot with encryption, with what we're able to do in our service. So all of the files, all the information is always encrypted between our data centers and your endpoints. Secondly, any place you put information, we use BitLocker encryption to make sure that all of those disk subsystems are encrypted. And lastly, something we call advanced encryption. You may have heard about this described in its prior incarnation as something our code name for it was Fort Knox. When you upload a file to OneDrive or SharePoint, we take those files and we break them down based on the size of them to 64K chunks, and we duplicate them. We make sure that we split those into at least 3 pairs. And each one of those sets is separately encrypted. The pairs are distributed on a rotating basis. The keys rotate every 24 hours. The keys are then moved to a separate storage unit, again, an extra layer of encryption is applied just to those keys. And at any point in time, even if a single key is compromised, worst case, all it can be used to do is to decrypt a piece of one file. That kind of, and all of those storage elements and where things are split across different physical data centers, that all rotates every 24 hours. That's the kind of on-premises security we're able to offer that is really cost inefficient for each individual customer to be able to do. And then finally, what we are able to offer around that, first and foremost, Azure RMS encryption, also known as Azure Information Protection, allows you to decide certain classes of information, I want to say, should always be encrypted even when downloaded on the front side. The encryption we were talking about before is the back-end encryption, the way we store things in the disks in our data center. But you can then extend that encryption and make sure that if someone wants to use a file or copy it to a thumb drive or email or make multiple copies of it, it will always stay encrypted. And then anytime someone wants to open that file, they need to come back to check with the endpoint and make sure. That way, you can always revoke that key. So if you have a salary file that only your financial people were having access to, and you think that maybe it got copied to someone else who shouldn't have it, you can revoke the key, and all of those copies out there in the wild are instantly rendered unreadable. And lastly, the way that we allow you to manage the keys, right now Azure services themselves generate the key. We've been doing an awful lot of work on this for a long time. Later this year, we will be officially announcing the release of customer-controlled encryption keys, so you can specify what the key is, and you can then go in and change the key. So if for any reason you want to render all the information in your tenant unreadable, you have the right to step in and do that. We don't have standing access to your information, and that way you can make it so that even the service levels that are sending files out to your customers can be rendered to lock those things down, to make it impossible for people to read that information without your releasing the keys further. And we only have, as I said before, there is no standing access to customer content. If you want us to look at something during troubleshooting, you have to ask us to do it. And when we do that, there's separate steps of approval. The audit chain is very high, and you're allowed to come to us and say, I want this engineer to have access for a finite period of time, 8 hours, or until this incident is done, and then immediately revoke their access to my data. You always can have visibility into what's going on with that. The way that that basically works, and this is extremely rare, this happens over the last 2 years. This has happened less than 100 times, but it is there and it's available for you. If there's an incident and a customer determines that there's, in working with Microsoft to solve it, that there's something that they want to have access to, we go check in the runbook. We see, for us to be able to get access to the data, the process then shifts over to a customer administrator who has to approve the access. Once the customer administrator approves the access, then it comes to Microsoft, and Microsoft's own supervisors need to approve the support request having access to the data. Then and only then do we activate the extended auditing, and we allow our support engineers to address your request and being able to step in and have access to the data. Until that incident is solved, at which point, at the end of it, the full audit trail is returned back to you, the person who made the request, so you can have confidence that we did only precisely the things that you asked us to do in the course of working with our information. So when we release this customer managed key capability, this gives you the ability to, as I mentioned before, step in, and in most cases, the service is on, but if you ever want to turn the service off and render it unreadable, you can revoke access to the key, making all the information available across the tenant impossible to work with. Okay, so the second major thing we talked about are secure access and sharing, and we've got some demos coming up here momentarily about this. For us, secure access and sharing involves controlling the way that my end users can generate links and pass them around the company or to people outside the organization, as well as support for our conditional access controls. And as I mentioned before, at all times, we need to balance end user and IT expectations. From a user perspective, they want to go anywhere, do anything, make it as easy as possible to create a share, and if they have outside people who need access to it, they want to add those people to the share. The classic IT or compliance perspective wants to make sure that we can always have visibility, that we can shape who's allowed to go in, that things that we know are risky or sensitive are always controlled, and that people can't just plug any old device into my tenant without my knowledge and approval in advance. And in balancing them, we need to understand the relative security needs of the information that we're looking at. If I have information that's highly sensitive, I want to optimize for security. There is a consumer products company I work with in the Midwest that uses really high security around their secret formulas. All their secret formulas are always vaulted or always encrypted so that only one person at a time can ever actually see that information. It's the opposite of collaboration, but again, these things are the crown jewels of their operation, and if the information ever got out in the wild, they would have an existential threat to some of their core businesses. On the opposite side, when information is considered to be less sensitive, we can optimize for usability. It's okay to have copies of memos that might be related to non-secret public information. My notes from coming back from an industry conference where I spoke and other people spoke, these are not terribly sensitive bits of information, and if other people want to come in and comment on it and share it and make copies for it, we should be optimizing for the usability of those things and not burden those highly collaborative processes with a lot of extra things. So when we build conditional access rules, we look at these major elements: who you are, what device are you on, what app are you running, where are you, and what kind of data are you working with. Azure Active Directory is the fundamental place where we define who the users and groups are. Users have to be authenticated against that before we can make an authorization decision. And by leveraging Azure Active Directory, we can take advantage of even more security steps there, such as multi-factor authentication. We also leverage Azure to shape what the user behavior, what the end result of access is across third-party devices. We know that bring your own device is real in many organizations. We're actually watching that market kind of split between organizations that want to empower people to work from wherever on as many devices as possible, and organizations that want to maintain tight control of information and encryption and only use corporate-issued devices. Either way, you can define policies to say what should happen when someone is coming in from a device that isn't connected to my domain and or isn't something that I'm currently managing. Our preferred answer to that is to use Microsoft Intune, but you can also integrate with other mobility providers like MobileIron or AirWatch, or just to name two. And we'll take a look at this in demo, something which we just officially announced last week, which was first released today. It's location-based access policies, allowing me to specify limit access to known good IP address ranges, along with the ability to bring in data loss prevention policies to control what happens if someone is trying to work with and share sensitive information. Regardless of permissions, I can open up permissions to all of you in this room to my tenant. But if I put a policy that says nobody from the IP addresses here can get in, and no one can ever have access to information that has a social security number, even if I try to share it, it doesn't matter if folks are in the access control lists. You're all going to be blocked from the information if I configured the policies that way, or vice versa. If I decide not to implement them, we can empower, as I mentioned before, for sharing. And the sharing controls that we have, again, getting back to the idea of being people-centric, you can optionally give our end users an awful lot of visibility into what's happening in the sharing architecture. with some tooling that's there for the admins as well as something that's there for the users to give them guidance as to who has access to their content and when people have gotten access to it. So that said, let's take a look at some of those capabilities, the way that we've stitched them up inside of the Admin Center. So the first thing I want to show you here, let's get back to a fair number of demo environments open. Let me get to this one. So here we have a modern SharePoint site. You can see I've played around with this site. Here's a picture of the water tower proving I've been to Chicago before. If we look at the date, because it's December 8th. So let's go take a look at a modern document library, just the fundamentals of sharing. So from an end user perspective, if they want to go out and share a file, they can come here, grab the clothing specifications. And if we open up the information pane for a modern document library, we can get a preview of the document. We're not going to really do an ECM session here. But what I can do is get some visibility into how this document's being shared. I can see right now it's shared out to the group. It's shared to everyone except external users. And from a user perspective, if I want to add users here, I can. And say I want to give Adam view permissions. I've also been struck by the fact that SharePoint at this point has been out in one shape or form for 16 years, and it's only in the last couple of years that we've actually made it relatively simple for people to share files. But here we have that sharing dialog. And I can also, a user with the right permissions can come in here, take a look at my clothing spec doc, inspect the full list of people who have access to it, and we include that panic button. So in addition to the collaborative gestures here, someone looks and says, I want you to stop sharing. That will immediately shut down and disable any guest links. Users also can decide, in addition to what they can do directly in the interface, decide that they want to get a link because they may want to inject it into a more formatted or crafted message or email, whether it's going out into a text message or something else. And so we allow you to generate a specific link or links that are limited to view access or edit access. And so if someone does this, someone needs to be a member of my tenant. They need an organizational ID. And when I generate that link, I can copy that. And anyone with that link will be given a view to the document, whether they already had explicit permissions or not. That's all how information gets shared. But I can really shape the way that information is getting shared inside of the SharePoint Online Admin Center. So if I look at the sharing controls that are available to me here, actually let me just make this a little easier for folks to read at the back of the room. So right now, I have sharing set to be relatively open across my tenant. I can say, right now, I'm going to allow sharing to authenticated users and allow people to generate anonymous links. Someone doesn't even need to log in. If they have the link, they can get into it. But I can set a policy that's permissions-wide, saying anonymous links should expire in 5 days or 7 days. And I can further shape what happens with users who don't log in. So by default, I'm not going to limit users' ability who get a link to edit documents, but I can choose to say across the board, for those anonymous users, looking at files and folders, I want to limit them just to view access. So they can go in, they can see what's there, but they can't add to it or change what's already out there if I choose to make those kinds of controls available. I also can structure what kind of link someone gets as to whether or not someone by default is going to be able to, we only want explicit permissions, and regardless of how someone has to have explicit permissions for any links to work. Or I can generate additional links, but only for people who are inside my organization, or allow people to open files up to people outside A couple of additional things I get here are the ability to whitelist and blacklist domains. So here we are with Contoso. We are currently, I may say, I'm really worried about information getting out there to other organizations other than Fabricam, because we're in a joint venture with Fabricam. In this case, the only place I can generate an email address, the only users I can generate a link for are users in my organization or at Fabricam. Or likewise, we might say, we're open, we're trusting, it's hard for us to predict all the places information might need to go, but we do know that those folks, down the road at Northwind, they are sworn competition. Contoso will not rest until Northwind is ground into the pavement. So we're going to make sure that no one's ever able to share information with a blocked domain there. A few additional controls. One of the most important ones is this. External users must accept sharing invite using the same account the invitation was sent to. Because if I send a link on something that we're working on in the iOS app to my friend at Apple, I want him to be able to open up the file, but I don't necessarily want him to be able to forward that email to other people inside or outside Apple and have anyone else, whoever just knows the link, able to do this. By turning this on, this setting will automatically be turned on if I am limiting what domains are allowed to come in. And then finally, I can automatically generate email to users. If users are sharing files, they sometimes like to know, are people actually working with them? This will give them email reminders when no new sharing invites go out or when new external users start accessing the file. Any questions on any of those sharing controls? Great. So the other thing, which we just introduced, some of the conditional access by location policies. I just want to show those to you right now. This is where I can shape what happens on devices and networks that are kind of beyond what I'm able to do at the outset. So first and foremost, what do I do with machines that aren't connected to my domain or aren't in the scope of management? What I can do right now is say, if I see a device come in that isn't currently under management, I may say, I'm not going to put any restrictions on it. So as long as someone has a valid login and they're coming in on my son's iPad, awesome. We're going to let them be as productive as they would be if they were on a corporate device. You also have the option of going into Azure to fully block those, and we drive that through the SPO admin console here. Or alternatively, we can say, we're going to go somewhere in the middle. We don't want to completely shut down productivity, so we want you to be able to view information when you're on one of these unknown personally owned devices, but we're not going to let you do anything beyond viewing the content that's already out there. So we can limit people to web only with no ability to sync, to print, or to download. Finally, our support for location-based access policies. This is something that is new, and we think about 5% of our customers, essential. And for the rest of them, not something that we want you to play with. The reason why we don't want you to play with this is this works exactly as it says. Only allow access from specific IP address locations. And if I come in here and type in 1.2.3.4 and press save, that's the only IP address in the world that can get onto my tenant, including this session. So I will lose the ability to then go back in and remove the policy. I have to open up a support ticket to do it. So this is, in the words of the immortal philosopher Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And this is one thing to be used with great care that you understand this. This just was released, the first release today. We're going to get additional feedback. We've already been getting feedback about things that we think make sense to add to this, such as, reminding you if you're about to block yourself out of your own tenant. That is going to be coming, as well as, right now these work as whitelists. We've also been asked to introduce blacklists, so certain known IP ranges, being able to block certain traffic, largely associated with certain countries that you may not be doing business in. So if you are a dental office in the Northeast United States, you probably don't have a lot of need for traffic from East Asian countries, but you never know. So again, we give you the controls. It's up to you. How do you composite them into your policies moving forward? Okay. So as I mentioned before, it's really hard to decide how large or small, how powerful or casual your policies should be without some understanding of what's going on in your organization. And whether it's through auditing or reporting or clues that we give to users in product, it's really important to be able to open up that data in a way that becomes useful to most organizations. So every user action is fully auditable. We kind of still had some momentum from on-premises for a while that you had to activate auditing, and that was true for a while. That's not true any longer. Like, every action is already going out to the audit logs. You can build custom alerts. You can use the management APIs from a code perspective to be able to inspect all of that traffic. One thing that we have done, it may seem that a lot of these capabilities we're talking about are heavily fixated on the cloud, and we are going to continue to be a cloud-first organization. But auditing is something we think is so important. It is part of our hybrid workload. Something I'm going to be talking about in my next session this afternoon is server and hybrid. For hybrid workloads, we give you the option of stitching up your on-premises user activity and compliance audit logs with the cloud logs, so I have one place to go. As we've crafted a user experience that allows a user to move almost seamlessly between their on-premises sites and their cloud-based sites in a unified browser, we think it's important to be able to also inspect that user activity. So if I want to see all of the files that Adam deleted last week, I have one place to go to get that information. So I can look at that across my entire information architecture or be able to drill down to a single user. So let's take a look at some of those capabilities. So there are some things that we make available to you through the Report Center. So the Report Center allows me to, at a top level, go in and look at things like usage. But for most things that involve our audit logs, what I want to do is take a look at my audit log search available to me through Search and Investigation. And so the audit log search right now is going to be asking me show for all activities. By default, it's only going to look over the past couple of days. Let's take something all the way back to December 1st. And here I can see all the kinds of things that I can inspect. Users checked in files, delete, access, all the file behaviors, all the sharing behaviors. Did someone use an anonymous link or a company shareable link? What happened with sync? What was being done administratively? Along with the ability to look at things like Exchange and Sway, user admin, so on and so forth. And really, let's just take a look at file deletion activities. So if I start to type, you'll see I want to limit this just to file deletions. And run the search. And so this is going back to December 1st, show me all the data that's here in the tenant as it's loading, relating to any files that have been deleted out of this environment. And considering it was running a little bit slow before, I'm not going to lose sleep if it takes. So let's leave this in the interest of time, because we're less than half an hour to go. We didn't find any deletions. Let's go find file access. I'm just going to go think about that, and we'll come back to it in a second. Okay, and here we go. So now I can see all the file accesses that have happened across this tenant, who the user is, what IP address were they on, et cetera. If I want to drill in and see who that user is, I can click here to be able to open up an additional pane of information that's going to show me who that user is if I wanted to see what some of their recent activity was, what policies govern that user, what the user's role is. Based on what I saw in the log, obviously a file access wouldn't be that interesting, but if I wanted to step in and take further changes, specify a policy based on something I saw in the log, this is the place where I could come in and turn that on. And just to show you the kinds of things that you can get to from the audit log, so through the UI, we can see everything that happened on a single page load, information that's coming in. I can drill in even further to find out what all different organization, correlation ID, what I was getting from the user string. If I wanted to do even further information against the audit log, I can do further filters. I can export the results. And across TechNet, we provide guidance. If you want to plug, using our management API, this to other consoles, to SIEM and so forth that you might be using to aggregate audit log information across a broad range of sources beyond even just Office 365, you certainly have that option out there. Okay. So information governance, as I mentioned before, is focused a little bit less on what the users and devices are doing and more what are the rules about the content. Where can it be used? Where can it not be used? What happens if something that matches a test suddenly shows up in a place that I didn't expect it? So your rules around being able to retain data are driven both from an admin perspective as well as we've now, over the past few months, been opening it up to users to be able to use metadata to classify information based on policies which an admin can specify. And our new policy engine for retention works Office 365 wide. So I can have one policy apply to all my information, whether they're files in SharePoint and OneDrive, or to things like messages or content that lives in Skype or any of the other modalities that we've been introducing for Office 365. The rules for how information should be retained are usually time-based, just as the classic rules that we've been using just within SharePoint for record flags are based on when content was seen or last modified, and being able to determine a particular schedule for when content should be preserved and when content should be expired and or deleted. So let me show you some of those retention policies as well as rules about sensitive information. So to do this, I am going to go back to my admin center. And open up the Security and Compliance Center. This one came up quickly. So one of the things I want to be able to open up are what are my rules for classifications. So we give you the ability to specify what we're calling labels, which are tags that I can use. Let's say these are for contract docs. And so when I want to use this retention tag, this label, what are the rules that are going to be automatically used when I create this? I can say, anytime this is used, I want you to preserve that content indefinitely or limit it to a period of time. I could say, I want you to preserve it for 10 years. And do I want to automatically delete it after 10 years? Or just prevent deletion until 10 years and then allow someone to go in and delete it interactively? Or I can also say, it can always be deleted, but in any case, once you get to, in this case, 7 years, wipe it off the system. And then I also can say whether I want that time to be calculated based on creation or modification, or when the label was applied, or some other event that's driven through code. Now, information lifecycle policies, which I also will talk about in depth when I do a session on ECM in SharePoint, these concepts have been in SharePoint at this point for years. What I think is interesting is I remember in the summer of 2010 doing a presentation in New York about information lifecycle and being able to set up 10-year retention on a document in SharePoint 2010, knowing full well that most of the people in the audience, the odds were very good that they would not be running SharePoint 2010 in 2020, because on premises, yes, these policies work, but it puts a little bit of extra pressure to make sure that you are executing upgrades in the proper sequence to make sure all of your policies are preserved. One of the wonderful things about Office 365 as an evergreen service is so long as you're still continuing to work with us in 20 years, so long as we're continuing to earn that trust and you're getting value from it and yada, 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 it's still going to be there in 20 years. So when I'm setting up a 20-year policy here, it's on a service where there is no upgrade, where we're continuously maintaining the service and being able to specify a policy that's going to run for 3 years or 5 years or a process that needs to run for 20 years makes an awful lot more sense in a permanent service like Office 365 than in some of the transient services that were based on some of the on-premises servers that are out there. So we can come in here, we can set this, say, 7 years after it was created. We're just going to force it to be deleted, create this label, and I now have a retention tag. On the front side of this, here's a site where retention tags have already been enabled. And if I come in here, pick this document about our sweatpants line at Contoso Clothing, when I open up the details pane, we talked through, and here's the, here's the preview of the document, here are the document properties, and then down here we have this classification tag. Now this is something that we've introduced in the last few months. We introduced it at Ignite. These tags can be set through code, they can be set through events. We can also allow them to be set with defaults and be set interactively. So here I can specify, you actually go a little bit lower on the screen, just at this resolution it's a little harder to read. Here's I can see all of the different things that I might want to apply to this. So this might be material just for the press, where I only want to save it for 3 years, as opposed to information about the fabrication, which, because people hopefully are going to be using Contoso's clothing for years to come, questions might still be relevant in 10 years, so we don't want to inadvertently delete this content all the time. There's a Swedish furniture manufacturer who shall go nameless, who very much wants to make sure that certain classes of information relating to their self-assembly furniture is permanently maintained, because even though the person who wrote that manual, that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful manual that I've never wasted hours putting, trying to assemble a bed with or losing screws with, they want to make sure that manual is out there. Even if the person leaves the company, they want to make sure that that kind of information is preserved essentially in perpetuity, and retention tags are one of the vehicles that they use to make sure that that's out there. The other related behavior around content and the way that we secure it across Office 365 relates to sensitive information types, which invokes DLP. So over here is where I see the lists of what's available to me for sensitive information types. And I can consume any of these, or something we have in preview right now, allowing me to come up with even further rules through setting up a DLP, data loss prevention policy. So let's walk through that process. If I come here to the Compliance Center, we give you a wizard to say that I want to set up a new policy. In this case, let's suppose I'm concerned most about financial data. It's going to ask me, what financial data do you most care about? And we offer some things here, some of them grouped by country. Let's grab PCI DSS, which is a set of standards and guidelines about how information that relates to credit and financial transactions for consumers needs to be maintained, both for efficacy and privacy. So at core, we're looking for credit card number data if I'm trying to comply with that. Next, it's going to ask me what the name of the policy is. We can call it that. And where do I want to apply this policy? So here in demo, we're going to talk about applying it enterprise-wide, but on a practical basis, you really wouldn't. You may have it may be perfectly fine for credit card data to show up in the finance and accounting sites, and we may want to just be checking for it to show up somewhere else. So here's where I can say, choose specific locations. And so I can say, do I want to look at everyone's email inboxes or just a handful of people? Do I want to look at every SharePoint site or pick specific subsites by URL? or block specific sites from this policy by URL. So if we're going to put a policy in place that says you can't use a social security number, we may, again, this would be the place where I would add in the URL for the finance site. Similarly, OneDrive, the CFO, I may or may not want her or him to be able to have social security numbers in their OneDrive. And then we can shape and see what happens if you ever see this right now. And we grabbed a set of policies designed for PCI DSS. We can come in here and add and change additional types. We may say, for example, I want to look for an American Banking Association routing number. Let's look for it. There's the ABA routing number. So if someone also has a bank routing number, we can add that into the policy I just built. We have over 80 tests, and the tests are looking for patterns. They're looking for certain fingerprints in a document. It isn't just, for example, for Social Security number, the 3-2-4 pattern, but also knowing what are valid and what are invalid numbers. And we're now adding the ability for you to specify your own. So if you have things that are unique account number formats, they always begin with F23 with a dash or a slash and something else. That's usually a good indication that something is a document that relates to one of your customer accounts. You can use that and compile them into these policies and start shaping what happens if you ever see a document that goes on with there. Here, right now, I want to detect if the content's being shared either outside or inside of the organization. If I go to the advanced settings, what I can step into is say, if I see a low or a high volume of content going on here, do you want to this is where I can, come in and say, if I want to use the simple settings, what happens if you see sensitive information out there? First and foremost, show policy tips to users and send them an email. So if someone drops a credit card number into a document and saves it, they're going to be prompted on their mobile devices as well as in the browser if they happen to be doing it there. You just added a credit card number to something you may not have intended to. How many times do I care about it? If I see 10 of them in, or maybe any time this happens, do I send an email to me as the creator of policy as well as the admins? And then do I want to automatically restrict who can access the content? Because right now, if this happens and someone is sharing it, we will immediately block the sharing so that only the creator of the content and the site administrators can see it. Regardless of what the permissions are that I put on it, no one else can see sensitive information so that it can't be shared, copied, or extended further. And then you have the option of either turning it on or just testing it so it'll flag things and send the emails but won't actually enforce the sharing restrictions, or keep it off entirely. And then we can step in, turn it on later, and that policy has been built. Okay. The last thing I wanted to just touch on, jumping back to my document library here, is the ability to come in and enforce encryption standards on this. So I may say, for example, for my legal document environment, which I just built, if I come in and look at the settings for this library, I can specify with something we call information rights management, which is the same thing as Rights Management Service or Azure Information Protection. What do I want to do if content originates here? So taking the example before, I may set a policy that prevents sharing Social Security numbers anywhere in the organization except this site. And why is this site special? Not just because I'm going to limit their permissions, but I'm going to step in and put additional policies here. Here's what I can say is something, this is intended for Social Security numbers, demo for what the description is. And if I look at what the options are, if I look at what the options that are available to me for that policy, I can say anytime someone I want you to maintain encryption on any files that are ever downloaded from this. And why do I want someone to, basically, I have the option to say, how long will someone cache that license? So this says how often does that document need to phone home for it to be able to be worked with. So here's what I can say, 0, and say, in this case, every time someone opens a document, I want them to check to see if the rights are still valid. And this is a place where I would have to explicitly say it's encrypted, and what I want someone to be able to do is, do I want them to be able to print it? Yes. Do I want them to be able to code against it? No. Being able to specify further things so that I can say to someone, you can still download this document and you can work with it, but you can't make copies of it or send further emails out and so on and so forth, allowing me to put particular protection in place of a document. Okay. So closely related to compliance is the idea of e-discovery and legal hold. We have 2 versions of e-discovery available to you, which are applicable to Office 365 content, including SharePoint and OneDrive. The idea of e-discovery is usually search-based. To respond to an administrative inquiry or a subpoena, being able to specify search strings to extract a result set, and then be able to go in, do further analysis about how I'm going to export that set or consume it into our advanced e-discovery artificial intelligence engine, which starts to look at, as someone is working with a result set, when they say, this matches, this doesn't, this matches, this doesn't, being able to start to infer those patterns to more intelligently tune those result sets. E-discovery was estimated at Microsoft. Every time we have to respond to a subpoena, it costs us at least $1 million. The goal of e-discovery for us is to turn that down to something that is well below that 6-figure threshold, being able to much more efficiently mine data and decide whether or not I'm going to preserve it or just export it. So that's the core of what we're able to do with e-discovery. In the interest of time, I'm not going to bounce back into demo for it, but just to mention that you already have the abilities in Office 365 to run e-discovery as well as in SharePoint on premises. If you are running Cloud Hybrid Search is the capability we have to take information on premises that gets crawled on premises and merge the index with the cloud. So I have one unified place to go to find all the information in my organization. When I have a Cloud Hybrid Search enabled, I'm able to run e-discovery searches against all of my content, not just the stuff that's been already moved to Office 365. And so in setting this up, we're able to structure particular cases, and I can determine whether information that I find there should be held or not. So finally, we wrap up with compliance and trust. So you shouldn't believe us when we say that our security is wonderful just because we say so. We do go out to independent standards bodies to get this verified and audited. We make all of their results available to you through the Office 365 Trust Center, as well as working with organizations around the world to make sure that we're matching the specific requirements for, or exceeding the requirements for specific operations in different jurisdictions and countries and regions like the EU. For example, when the EU kicked out the safe harbor provision, safe harbor was a legal construct that allowed largely US corporations to operate in Europe with private data. Europe has a very different legal approach to individual information, PII. It is a legal construct there that PII is always the property of the person it's about, which means that organizations have to take great care since they don't own the information in those databases. The US has a different rule. The information belongs to whichever organization mined it, Google, Facebook, whoever is collecting those kinds of information. So how does a US company do business with Europe? There was a legal construct called Safe Harbor about the kinds of things that needed to be done. Safe Harbor was kicked out by a court in Brussels 2 years ago, but we still continue to honor all the protections of Safe Harbor, along with our data processing agreements. We really want to make sure, first and fundamentally, that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're protected and that your information and your operations are protected because you're coming to a protected service as you work around the world. This is, our compliance wall. This doesn't even do it justice. All of the different organizations we want to make sure that we're working with, whether they're in the US or abroad, whether they're civilian or defense or highly regulated, making sure that we're leading the way, not just for our commercial clouds, but with things like GCC, some of our secure clouds, which are available for DoD accredited organizations. These are all things that we make sure that we're working with, along with participating in industry groups and think tanks and leadership and contributing to that research, whether they're organizations like AIM or the Cloud Security Alliance, making sure that our investments there are things which we're just able to use to make our service more transparently compliant to you. The core thing, and one of the key places where we went in today for some of our demos, is protection.office.com. That's the place where you can see not just the audits against your user activity, but what we're able to do that. Through the Admin Center, we always will show you where your data is physically being stored. We are under legal restrictions. We cannot move your data without telling you at least 30 days in advance and giving you an option to do it. And finally, the Office 365 Trust Center. We're totally transparent about what we're doing, what our certifications are, what our audits have found, what third-party verification has led to, and you have the right to see all of those also through the Office 365 Trust Center. As we said before, it's your data. We don't look at it. We don't really have an advertising business. We're not mining your information to show ads that prop up inside of your email. We have no standing data, access to your data. The only time we have that access is when you give it to us for troubleshooting. We don't default to having things be open. By default, when you create content, the content starts only being available to the person who created it. It's up to you to open up sharing beyond what was set as the original defaults. OneDrive, for example, we had continued some older patterns from on-premises about letting there always be a shared area in your OneDrive. The way that we structure OneDrive now is your OneDrive is just personal. Someone has to explicitly share information in a personal OneDrive before anyone else can get access to it. Brad Smith, our president and chief legal officer, continues to fight the good fight for our rights to A, protect your information, to not hand it over to government authorities without clear, valid court orders, and to be transparent about that. As much as possible, if government is asking us for information about, for whatever reason, we're redirecting them to the customers. We're the custodians of the data. It's not our data, and we don't want anyone touching your data without your knowledge of it. We think that's incumbent on us to continue assuring the level of trust that we have. Again, for more details on this, visit the Office 365 Trust Center. So to wrap this up, the 5 core tenets, I've shown you some of the core capabilities. One asset that we released late last fall, which has been really helpful, is this white paper. This link will open up a white paper which goes in depth to all of the things that we offer you for security and privacy controls across SharePoint and OneDrive in the cloud and on premises. So for more detail on that, if you still have a couple of folks in your organizations who are recalcitrant about not ready to go to the cloud, please feel free to use this white paper. I personally put dozens of hours into it along with some of my colleagues, and we hope that it's a good asset for you. And as always, if you have further questions, please reach out to us. We have a very busy roadmap also for what we're able to offer across platform security, across all of these things. I've highlighted in bold a couple of things that have already shipped. But being able to, we're continuing to invest heavily in conditional access policies. The location policy just shipped a first release. Some of the other policies that we have around device or being able to set in session timeouts, those are impending between now and the middle of the year. We will communicate all of those things through the Office blogs as well as the tech community blogs when it's time to release any of those capabilities. So that said, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of Tech Summit.